Hi everyone, welcome back as we begin a new month. We begin April. It is again crazy that we're getting
I know.
so quickly through this year, but with April comes a new spiritual discipline that we will focus on, and this month is silence and solitude. So, what do you think of silence and solitude?
Well, I'd like to know what it is. What is silence? What is solitude? Now, we're a people who are accustomed to being around people all the time, and silence is not one of those things that we
No.
get very much of. I don't know about you, but silence could be rare, and solitude certainly, if you've got a family, that could be rare as well. And so, when we talk about silence, though, you know, it is just being quiet. Just don't talk. Just be quiet. Don't talk as much. And it's the spiritual um, portion of it is to stop talking and let our minds focus on who Christ is and focus on God. And Colossians 3, Paul tells us to set our minds on the things above. And so we have to be quiet if we're going to do that.
Yeah. And I think, especially when we talk about like Western culture, American culture, noise is a key point to our whole being. Noise of what we have to do next, what's going on in the day, making schedules in our mind, listening to music, having a TV on in the background, talking to people, being around people. It's just noise, noise everywhere. And so I know when we get out of noise and we're getting towards silence, it gets super awkward. Even like I had a counseling class, and my professor was trying to prove to us how terrible we are in silence. And so she set a clock for 1 minute and said, "All right, we're going to sit here for 1 minute and no one can make a noise." And most of the class just kind of started twitching and going, "Oh man, we must be like 5 minutes in. How long has it been?" And it had only been 30 seconds. So silence is something, and solitude even is something that we're not really great at because we've been around noise so much in our lives.
We're culturally conditioned to noise. Noise is one of those things that I think if we don't have it, then it feels awkward, kind of like that, your
Yeah.
example from your class. And maybe maybe you can have experienced that. Maybe you have you know what it feels like to find a place of silence only to become anxious because it was too quiet. And we're a people that are accustomed to this constant. We have to have these constant sounds
Yeah.
that are going on all the time, and
Well, I
uh,
think if we're honest with ourselves, oftentimes that even if we say we want silence, we like I just want a break from all this. Deep within us, we can't handle a break. It's just like there's a song where it talks about someone stealing their car radio and driving without the radio, and just how they begin to having to think about things other than the noise that distracted them from life and who they are and their relationship with God. And I think we like the noise, even if we get irritated by the noise. It's
yeah.
just kind of a place of comfort in some ways because we're used to it.
Well, and it's not about living in a vacuum,
No.
where there's complete silence. That's not the goal. The when it comes to silence, it's really more focused on finding a place where we can focus on God and concentrate on God and not talk as much. But for most of us, that trying to find that place is difficult
Mm-hmm.
because we're conditioned to always have some kind of noise and that noise tends to distract us. If you've got a cell phone, you know exactly what I'm talking about. How anxious do we get when we can't find our phone or
Or
uh,
even more, if you have your phone on you a lot, you start getting those ghost vibrations where you think your phone or your watch or something's making a noise to where you go and look at it and there's no notification there. And then you're like, man, I could have sworn I heard it.
and so modern technology, while it's good in the right way, it certainly has created, um, uh, I guess, an anxiety for people because they feel like they have to be have to be connected to that
Mhm.
phone all the time. And even like computers, when the computer generation began, it was supposed to make us more productive, and in some ways it has, but in other ways it's made us. Um, it's that whole adage, if you can do more, do more.
No,
And so silence is still a place, still something I'm looking forward to.
well, I think yeah, with silence, we have to be extremely intentional to be able to have silence, and I think there's many ways we can get to a place of silence of like you know, times that I find silence and solitude often is if I'm driving somewhere,
Hmm.
but I have to be intentional to not
Turn
because I
off to
like
turn off the
music.
radio.
I like music. I like listening to a podcast or something when I drive or talking on the phone. I do that a lot, but I have to
You
be
use hands
intentional.
free though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay.
Any police officer out there, it's hands free, but it's all hands free. And but I like having that on or having something going. But I have to be intentional of like, hey, let's turn it off. Let's not call anybody. Let me just sit in my car as I drive this, 20, 30 minutes or whatever,
Yeah.
and just think about God. Not think about, oh, well, I'm going to go do this and this and this and this and start talking in my mind to myself, but to think about the things of God. Think about a scripture or pray quietly or something like that. And then the other time that I'll often find silence is if right now it's if I can get the kids to bed and the weather's not freezing cold outside to go sit on our back porch with a cup of tea or coffee or something and just sit and listen to like birds chirping and see the sun start to, drop and things like that. Um,
Oh, see, when I think about driving down the road like that, I've tried that. I've tried that. But and maybe maybe you're like me, and as I'm driving down the road, I turn the radio off, and I'm going to spend some. This is going to be some me and God time. It doesn't take very long before I start getting distracted. And when I find myself getting distracted, and then I begin to get a little
mhm,
discouraged, and then I think, well, what's the use? And I'll just turn the
yeah,
radio back on, and I'll try again later.
mhm.
And so while that does work, I need to be a little more intentional about it. I think I need to be a little more
Well, I think
persistent.
yeah, I think it's a good point because I think in any situation, distraction. I mean, if you're sitting intentionally saying, "Hey, I want to spend time with God," what better time is there for the devil to go, "All right, let's get to work here and try and keep you from doing that," because Satan doesn't want us to spend time with God.
Oh no, he's going to work hard to keep
Yeah.
us from spending time with God, and he is just going to he knows our buttons, he knows exactly where
Hmm.
we're weak at, and he knows exactly how to get us distracted. And the last thing he wants us to do is to spend focused time with God, and that's where the silence, not talking,
Hmm.
sometimes we go to God and we go to him with our prayers, and we want to we're talking, but we don't ever stop to listen to him talk back to us.
No.
And sometimes what we need to do is maybe just open our Bible, and with a notebook, our
Hmm.
journal and a writing instrument, and we just be quiet
No.
and listen to see what God has to
No.
say to us. And those are the things that we can journal then.
No. Well, and I had a professor actually at seminary one time when we were talking about silence and solitude, where he suggested even just to focus on if your mind is distracting you, just to take a moment and say, all right, let me just focus on breathing, deep breath in, deep breath out. Some of those kind of habits to try and refocus and say, okay, let's push those. Okay, well, did I leave the oven on? Did I keep this on? What's happening here or there? And just to say, all right, let's get back to God. Show me what your word has to say.
Yeah. Well, and you've probably noticed already a lot of what we've talked about has been more oriented towards
Silent.
solitude,
Yeah.
finding that quiet
Yeah.
place. And that's the point, is solitude and silence often go hand in
Hmm.
hand. And they are coupled with journaling, Bible reading, and prayer. And so
Hmm.
all of it is interconnected. It's all spiritual disciplines that
Yeah.
interconnect with each other. And the reality is Jesus felt like it was important enough to get away to spend time with the Father, and he found a quiet place of solitude to be
Yeah.
able to just spend time with the Father. And even after his disciples, he had sent them out to do ministry, and they come back. He says, "Now come away with me to a quiet place
Hmm.
where you can rest." And so if we need to do those kind of things. It's
Yeah.
important that we do those kind of things. And I think that not practicing solitude and silence before God,
Hmm.
and spending that concerted, pointed, intentional time with Him in a place where we can focus on Him, I think that it has a lot to do with our uh, I want to say lack of spiritual growth, but I think
Hmm.
that's a lot has a lot to do with it. That we just don't do that enough.
Yeah.
Um, we just don't spend that enough time being quiet and getting away with God.
Yeah, and I think it's if we say, well, God just doesn't speak to me. The reality is we might not be listening a whole lot. We might just be so distracted by our own thoughts or what we're saying to God or thinking that we don't sit in silence and solitude saying, all right, God, now I'm going to pause and let you speak to me,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, think about this too. I mean, think about if if uh, if the scriptures say that God spoke in that still small voice, uh, if we're not quiet, if we don't find a place where we're kind of separate from those distractions and we're not being intentional about listening to God speak to us, the noise that's all around us that we've now become accustomed to, and that we think we're supposed to have all the time, it may drown out that still small voice.
Well, it's kind of like what came to mind was when I was a kid, we'd be driving on vacation or something, and if it was nighttime, we'd be cutting up in the back seat as kids do, and my dad would always say, "Be quiet, I'm trying to see," you
Yeah.
know. And I think it's the same thing. Like we're trying to see what God has for us, see what God is showing us. Sometimes we just gotta be quiet, even though hearing and seeing doesn't seem to make sense.
Oh, it makes
It,
perfect sense. It makes perfect sense because most of these people out here who've been
yeah.
driving very long, they know that if they get to a place where they need to concentrate, they have to turn the radio down or turn it
Hmm.
off so that they can
Yeah.
they can see what they're doing. And for example, what about um, do you use kind of any kind of white noise or things like that when you go to bed? Do you turn a fan on? Uh,
I usually like a fan on, but I haven't in a while had the fan on. So,
well, see, I,
but
I can't I can't sleep when it's quiet because it's
mhm.
too quiet, and I hear everything,
Yeah,
and even with bad hearing,
yeah,
I hear all kinds of noises that keep me awake, and so I have a fan on, and when I travel, I try to make sure
hmm,
I turn on some kind of white noise
yeah,
to help me sleep.
mm, yeah. And I think that's a very common white noise, which I think again is because we're so used to noise every
Yes,
day and at all times. I mean, because if we really sit down and think about like, okay, what time during my day is there not noise? It's gonna be hard to find one.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's gonna be nonstop all the time where we have noise. Which is why I think this spiritual discipline in particular is going to be one of the hardest for many of us to do,
yeah,
because it's the one that also has the most excuses that can be tied with it.
sure,
Even with if you have kids, I know for Alyssa and it's easy to say, well, how am I going to have silence and solitude with a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old?
yeah,
That's impossible. And Whitney actually talks about in his book of like, hey, this is where your husband and wife, you're working together to be more like Christ. This is where you say, hey, honey, you have the kids in the morning. I've got to go spend some time with Jesus, and then we're going to swap. Yeah, I'll take the kids and you go spend time with God.
yeah.
Um, But then you have the excuse of like, well, if I'm not with the kids, I got dishes to do, I got laundry to do, I got got a list of chores to do, and we have to say, you know what, it's okay for us to put that aside for 15, 30 minutes, an hour, so that we can spend time with God because
Yeah,
God's
it's
more
worth it.
important.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. And I hope that as we go through this month, that we and all of you will have a better grasp and understand the value in just spending some silent and alone time with God and what that does to your spiritual life. One of the things that Whitney talked about in his book, as he's given examples of places to go or things to do, he talked a lot about the Wesleys,
Hmm.
uh, and John Wesley, Charles Wesley,
Yeah.
and a lot of that time frame. They didn't have the distractions that we have, and I'm kind of uh, it made me kind of long for that a little
Hmm.
bit, in that they could go out and they had to go out and work in the fields. People had to
Hmm.
work in the fields, and there wasn't, apart from singing to themselves or the sound of the hoe or the shovel in the soil, it was just nature and
Hmm.
the person and God.
No.
And they were able to spend a lot of time just communing with God as they were going about their daily lives. And we have to find that place. We have to carve
Well, and
that
I think
out.
that's with in Christian life when we're talking about the spiritual disciplines, because yeah, I agree. Definitely like looking at that in this silence and not all the noise. Like, man, that's I wish I had that. But I also enjoy being able to turn the tap and have hot water, and not having to boil water to get it hot. But I think that's where we have to find that balance in the commodities, because for too long we've allowed the kind of pleasures of today to rule our lives to where we've thrown away these gifts that God has given us, such as silence and
Yeah,
solitude, such as spending alone time with Him. We've thrown those away because of the noise,
yeah.
and they've kind of dictated what we do in our lives.
Well, and so what can you do? What are some things that you can do? Well, you might not be able to find hours, or even you might not even be able to start with 15 minutes of silence and solitude. Start with 1 minute, just
Mhm.
1 minute. As you go about your day, find 1 minute that you can just be quiet and be with and focus on God.
And I'll say
And
set a timer. Don't if you don't set a timer, you're going to be looking at your watch, looking at your phone,
yep,
going, "All right, is it over yet?" And that's not silence.
that
That's
no, that's
solitude.
no. Don't join a monastery. That's
Yeah.
not we're not encouraging anybody to join
Mhm.
monasteries. What we're encouraging, though, is even as you go through your busy day, and we know that your lives are so busy, even as you go through your busy day, look for just 1 minute. Find your 1 minute that you can just be quiet and focus on God. And at some point you may be able to stretch that
Yeah.
to 2 minutes or 5 minutes, and maybe it's on your lunch break, and instead of sitting with everyone else and socializing, maybe that's an opportunity to carve out a portion of that time, if not the whole time, to spend quietly before God.
Mhm.
And I think we can do some of those things. And also, um, you might not, we might have more noise than
Mhm.
they had back before radio and television and cell phones and all those kind of things, but um, we can find those places.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be in the park. Sometimes it might be on the rail trail, walking on the
Mhm.
rail trail, or or something like that. In fact, there are rooms here at the church during the week that are not being used. That is a perfect place to come, go to the back of the building and just be quiet and spend some alone time with God.
Yeah.
And so, there are options for us. We just have to be intentional about planning it, being intentional about it, being purposeful about it, and stick to your schedule.
Yeah. And I think that's the key word for all the spiritual disciplines we talk about is intentionality.
Yeah,
Because if we're not intentional, there are many excuses we can make for not doing these spiritual disciplines.
yeah,
And when we make them, they're pretty good excuses to us, you
Now,
know.
some of them are. Some
Uh,
of them are
well, I
pretty
said
good
to
to
us,
us. Yes.
to us.
Some of the excuses we make, there are a lot of reasons why we can justify not doing some things.
Mm,
Um, but that justification is only temporal.
mhm,
It doesn't really help us with the eternal.
yeah,
And so, we really want to focus on spending some quality time with God. And it might start with 1 minute. It might start, you might already know how to carve out 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of your day, or even more. And so praise God for that. But we do want to encourage you as we focus on these disciplines this month of silence and solitude, uh, to if you've not yet started, get started.
yeah. And again, I think silence and solitude, along with prayer and reading our Bibles and journaling, all of these coupled together, are amazing.
Yeah,
Um, Especially just to be able to, read your Bible, have a verse that you can kind of meditate on, you can think about, and then go into silence and solitude of just, you know, not letting your mind wander, but focusing on God's word,
hmm,
um, really helps grow us in our spiritual walk, helps
yeah,
us to grow closer to God, helps us to feel closer to Him.
yeah,
Because it's not us trying to, okay, let me get this done. We're intentionally saying, all right, I got to
yeah,
pause my life, because that stuff's still going to be there,
yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's just like the old pastor's wife said, um, that her mentality was the dishes always have to be done. The clothes are always going to be dirty. No matter how much she does it, they're still going to be there.
Mm,
So she can put them off for a few moments to spend with Jesus.
yeah, yeah, good.
So, but yeah, so we hope this month that you will find some time daily, hopefully, to spend in silence and solitude, to spend just being with God, not allowing just all the sound around you and the noise and the distractions, but to spend some time with God.
Yeah,
And we know it will be an encouragement to you, and it will help build you up this month.
yeah,
And at the end of the month, you'll feel so much closer to God.
yeah. So find that time and find that place, and we're here to help you. If you need help with this particular or any of the disciplines, we're here for you.